hot. Test.
Hot flash, 9:45. Big crash, at it again. You got it. I know who you are. Tripwire, can't get it right. Misfire, out of your sight. But you know it. You took it too far. Nobody thought you could do it, least of all you. But I knew. Tear a hole and roll right through it. Now it's time to get down to it. Lock it, stock it, pop it like a rocket. You can dock it, clock it. Never gonna stop. You gotta straighten up for a taste of what I got. My sugar drop. Hello, we are the Lazy Susans. You might have heard about us on WBUR or read about us in Cognoscenti. We've been doing this for about a year, started during the pandemic, and lo and behold, we have a couple original songs for you tonight. This first one's called Sugar Drop. It's about how to get our attention. Ooh, you gotta whip me up, whip me up, whip me up if you want my sugar drop, sugar drop, sugar drop. Ooh, you gotta fix her up, fix her up, fix her up if you want my sugar drop, sugar drop, sugar drop.
Ooh, you gotta sober up, sober up, sober up if you want my sugar drop, sugar drop, sugar drop.
Ooh, you gotta fill me up, fill me up, fill me up if you want my sugar drop, sugar drop, sugar drop.
Ooh, you gotta pump me up, pump me up, pump me up if you want my sugar drop, sugar drop, sugar drop. Nobody thought you could do it, least of all you. But I knew. Ooh, tear a hole and roll right through it. Now it's time to get down to it. Lock it, stock it, pop it like a rocket. You can dock it, lock it. Never gonna stop. You gotta straighten up for a taste of what I got. My sugar, 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 lock it, stock it, pop it like a rocket. You can dock it, lock it. Never gonna stop. You gotta straighten up for a taste of what I got. My sugar drop.
I watch you run inside and shut the door. Your books hit with a thump on the floor. Baby girl, is everything okay? You scream, forget it, go away. Sneaking out on a Saturday night, sipping on a warm Bud Light, kissing strangers as the bottle spins. Living all my teenage sins, 'cause I've been there, I've done that. Hey, 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 I've been there, I've done that. Whoa, oh, oh, I've been there, I've done that. Hey, 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 oh, you know it's gonna be alright. Thinking money gets replenished every day. Just tap your app, you don't gotta pay. No job, you need to find a better way. You want my password? No, that ain't okay. Pink hottie so short, I can see pink cheeks. Shoulders so tight, they be on for a week. Texting, sexting, don't get arresting. Wanna get as many likes as ever messing. He wants, she wants, hey, you gotta get it all. Don't let your friends ever see you fall out of fashion with a passion. Rolling in my Swatch watch, I know I'm passing. You don't need a million likes to prove who you are. Find peace and love and you'll go far. So just sit down and talk it out. And tell me what your life is really about. 'Cause I've been there, I've done that. Hey, 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 I've been there, I've done that. Whoa, ho, ho. I've been there, I've done that. Whoa, ho, ho. I've been there, I've done that. Hey, 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 hey. I've been there, I've done that. Whoa, I've been there, I've done that. Hey, 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 hey. I've been there, I've done that. Whoa, ho, ho. I've been there, I've done that. Hey, 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 hey. I've been there, I've done that. Whoa, I've been there, I've done that. Hey, 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 hey. Oh, you know it's gonna be alright.
Thank you.
Oh, you all came. I think we should give those ladies another round of applause.
Yeah.
How about that? Good evening, everybody. My name is Chloe Axelson. It's really good to be here with you. I'm Cognoscenti's senior editor.
And I am Franny Kartoff. I'm COG's founding editor.
And I should say, if you missed Joanna's essay, Joanna Weiss was in the middle here singing the first song. If you missed her essay about being a member of the Lazy Susans on Morning Edition this morning, you should 100% go back and look it up. It's about rock and roll, obviously, but it's also about working motherhood and enduring friendship. And those women, those 5 ladies up here, have known each other for nearly 2 decades. They met when their kids were babies. They got together over pizza nights on Fridays, and then that morphed into holidays together and vacations. I got to hang out in Gay's basement for a little while for one of their rehearsals. She was on the keyboards. It was very fun. They made me a drink. And I'm going to make Franny be in a band with me one day.
Yeah, that is
Right?
not a tough sell, as long as you get to play bass.
You can play the bass. You can play the bass.
So we're here to kick off this evening. It's our pleasure to welcome you to COG's 10th anniversary celebration.
Honestly, this sort of feels like a cross between a wedding, a bat mitzvah, and the Grammys.
It's definitely a milestone. So I personally spent a quarter of my life building and sustaining COG. I like to joke that it's my first baby, but it actually is, it feels true. We wanted to just start tonight by thanking a few people. Charlie Kravitz. Audience there he is. I was just so thrilled to see you tonight, Charlie. For those of you who don't know, in the media landscape, COG is a crown jewel, not only in the local landscape, but also in the national landscape. And it should be known that it was Charlie's vision that gave life to COG. And we wouldn't be here without you, Charlie. Also, special thanks to Iris Adler, who built COG with us from scratch and then empowered us and trusted us to take the ball and run with it. We couldn't have done it without you, Iris, and we love you.
I also want to thank WBUR CEO Margaret Lowe. Incredible support from the moment Franny and I sat nervously in her office. I remember doing that. She just sort of intuitively got what we were up to. And thank you. Thanks for that, Mark. Thanks to Tiffany Campbell and Dan Mozzie, who are our fearless leaders in the newsroom. And also the CitySpace team, who, by the way, has been tasked with bringing COG to the stage for the first time ever. And it was a thing we did together. So CitySpace team, thank you very much. And also big, giant thank yous to Kathy Burge and Sarah Shukla, who are sitting here. These are COG's intrepid editors, And many of you know their ideas and smarts and compassion that shine through every page. Thank you, guys. And finally, a big thanks to all of you.
How many people here tonight count themselves as COG contributors? Can you guys just stand up for a second?
Stand up for a second.
Please give us a round of applause. Woo-hoo!
It's a pretty remarkable community we've built here since 2012. We've published more than 4,750 essays, which is a lot of essays, by 1,100 contributors. And I'm not really sure what we could possibly say about the past 10 years in the next few minutes, but we're going to do our best to tell you a little story about what COG is and what it means to us. So early on in the pandemic, our colleagues on WBUR's membership team asked the two of us to write promos. Those are those little advertisements that you hear on the radio encouraging people to donate.
So it was pandemic times, early days. So we were, of course, working from home with many small children underfoot.
So seven of them at the
Seven
time?
of them?
Yep.
6 of them at the time.
6, right, good point.
But we'd write up a script and read it to each other over FaceTime in our home studios, which are our closets, our respective closets. And that's to like muster the courage to stand up here in front of all of you. That's kind of what I'm picturing us doing right now.
And for the record, that's my husband's side of the closet. And I don't know what had happened, but just... Sorry, Sam. Come on. So I came to WBUR about 5 years ago. I'd been a contributor, and then I hopped the fence to become an editor. And by then, Franny had already been here for a number of years.
And there was no extra space in the part of the newsroom where I sat, so Chloe was assigned a seat on kind of the other side of the newsroom. And so in those first days, we mostly communicated over Slack, an instant messaging app. We haven't done a specific accounting of the words that were exchanged over the course of those years, but it definitely is in the tens of millions.
We talked about the news and ideas and edits and our husbands and what we were making for dinner. And it seems fitting that we got to know each other through the written word because that's also how we know so many of you.
Yeah, it's funny because for how well we feel like we know all of you, there are only a handful of COG authors that we've actually ever met in person.
Until tonight.
So we might not know the contours of your faces or, your stature, but we do know how you craft an argument. We know how you think about U.S. immigration policy and the Red Sox and Boston's long winters, Sharon Brody, Anita Diamond.
And in some cases, we're also familiar with some of your most intimate experiences, your favorite love song, your stories of pregnancy, what holidays sound and smell like in your home.
And over time, we've gotten to know many of your actual voices, too, as COG's ambitions grew beyond the page to the radio and even to video. And no spoilers, but you're going to hear a little bit of that tonight.
Whether it's our politics or climate change or year 3 of a global pandemic, the world can feel like a whole lot these days. And it's COG's writers, so many of you, who've helped us unearth and hold on to some emotional truth in this swirl of total insanity. And at our best, the work COG publishes, I think, helps metabolize the state of not knowing in all its forms, to help our readers, and maybe to help ourselves too, be more accepting of a life that defies prediction. We've offered a platform to so many voices that might not otherwise be heard.
And we've done our darndest to pay attention, as Mary Oliver wrote, for that is our good and proper work. And tonight, we celebrate 10 years of that work. We're going to exit stage
Right?
Right? We're going to enjoy the show. Radio Boston's wonderful host, Tiziana Dearing, is going to take it from here. It just so happens that COG was an early and often contributor to Cognoscenti, going all the way back to 2013. So you're in excellent hands. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for being here, everybody.
Thank you for being here, everybody.
Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you
One more for them. Thank you for bringing this to all of us, the opportunity to contribute, to read, to learn, to be neighbors, to care about each other and laugh and cry and live together. Thank you, Charlie and Iris, for the birthing of this and the opportunity to be here. So I was an early contributor, and I was going to tell you what COG means to me, but I'm not, because this is what we're going to do instead. You're going to shout it out. We're going to do a shout out. So what does Cognoscenti mean to you? Authenticity. What else? Integrity, connection. More over here? Values, humanity. Curiosity, ideas. Community. What else?
Idiosyncrasy.
I love it. Yeah. Over here? Joy. Yes. Anyone else? Voices. Insights. Understanding. Culture. Fantastic. How does that feel?
Oh, it's like
Yeah.
a tomato.
And that's what we're doing here tonight. And the opportunity to get to bring these voices to you is really fun. It's really exciting. So let me tell you how the rest of this night's going to run down. Now that we've had a mini concert and we've met the founders, we're going to do a few things here. We have a rich program. We're going to hear from other contributors over the decade. They'll talk about what COG means to them. They'll share our work. We've got montages of stories ranging from sports to music. 4 contributors on stage. I'll have an opportunity to interview contributors from 2 different essays. We're going to begin with and end with readings. The beginning will be John Vercher, who wrote his essay, The Unbearable Whiteness of Being, following the murder of George Floyd. And we'll end with Ted Flanagan's essay. They came in 104th out of 104 teams, and they won big, which was written after his 12-year-old twin boys baseball team came in dead last in a National Little League tournament. In between these readings, I will interview 2 sets of authors. And now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to John Vercher.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay, this is a lot of people. I have to do just a brief moment of personal thanks as well. I'm fortunate, at least at this point in my career, to call myself a working writer, and that couldn't be possible without Cognoscenti. My first ever published essay was with them. They took a chance on me, and for some reason published a bunch more. But the team there was amazing. Kathy, your editing was amazing. Chloe, Sharon Brody, who is now one of my text buddies. Like, it's just the word I should have shouted out when we were doing that was family. This feels like a homecoming, so thank you very much. Just a quick bit of contextualization. I wrote this essay when Rachel Dolezal was up to her nonsense. And I was trying to sell my first book, which dealt a lot with identity. And so what was going on during that period and when she was being interviewed and all of that, part of it resonated with me as a relatively new father. So I wrote about it. So hope you'll indulge me for just a couple minutes. I used to make fun of my pop's afro. I remember the way he used to trim it in the bathroom mirror, the way he styled and shaped it to geometric perfection. Yeah, see, look at that. That thing is beautiful. I didn't know it at the time, but I envied that hair. I still do. I am a biracial black man. Pop's loose curls, plus my mother's arrow straight locks, left me with a shock of hair more Prince than Angela Davis, skin more Dwayne Johnson than Wesley Snipes. So I heard the question as early as grade school. What are you exactly? The question dogged me through high school, followed me to college, nipped at my heels through adulthood until I shaved my thinning hair. My wife is white, so my sons have inherited the same dilution of skin and hair I got from my parents. My youngest is blonde. He looks white. I'm raising my sons as my father raised me, to be proud of their blackness. My wife and I stock their shelves with children's books by authors and with characters of color. But I worry my sons will be confronted with that same question. What are you? And when they answer as they've been taught, will they be doubted? I experienced that disbelief. No way was I mixed with black. I didn't dress right. I didn't talk right. As a child, you want to belong more than anything. The constant disbelief and invalidation of your identity wears you down, to the point you almost begin to question it yourself. It saps you of the courage to stand up to racism when it's spoken in your presence because you don't want to be alone anymore. I won't have that for my sons. Those who cling to the fallacy of post-racial America are sure to tell me that times are different. Race is a social construct. It doesn't matter what color my sons are, as long as they are good people. But it matters what color they are. In many ways, my sons will benefit from their lighter skin and hair. It may spare them pain, and I'm grateful for that. But I also hate that this divergence from their blackness brings me some sense of relief. Pop still wears that afro. A little grayer, a little less full, no less proud. Once my older son asked to touch his grandfather's hair. It was a moment of pure innocence, but it carried a weight that rang of that very privilege that I both dread and hope for. It came from a child's curiosity, and that made me smile. But in the inside, I cringed. While my father laughed it off and acquiesced, I know he felt it too, along with something else. We still have work to do. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eileen McNamara. You might remember me as a columnist for the Boston Globe, and I've been teaching for a long time now at Brandeis University. What does Cognoscenti mean to me and to the city of Boston? It's democratized commentary in this town. You hear now not just from journalists and judges and lawyers and doctors. You hear from school teachers and nurses and mothers struggling to balance work and life. You hear from everybody who has a story to tell and can tell it in a verifiable way. It's changed the way we think about opinion writing in Boston.
Hi, my name is Teresa Okokin, and I am a writer and storyteller and teacher in the greater Boston area. The first piece that I ever wrote with Cognoscenti was immediately following the murder of George Floyd, and it was so meaningful and so impactful for me to have a place at that time that wanted to hear my voice and wanted to hear my particular perspective on an issue that was so close to my heart and so close to my family. Also, as I said, I'm a teacher, and Cognoscenti, when I think of Cognoscenti, I think of a place that is inviting and welcoming of new writers. And as a teacher, knowing that I can refer my students to the fantastic editors at Cog as a place that wants to hear from them is really, really important to me.
As Karen and Alex come up, John, one more time. That was magnificent. So we're going to have a conversation now with Karen Nassim-Benny and Alex Goldstein. And Karen's piece in Cognoscenti, the first part of the title, "He blew me a kiss, and that was the last time I saw him." And Alex Goldstein is the founder of Faces of COVID, which you may know as the loyal daily attention to those we've lost to this pandemic and the elevating of their stories. So we're going to have a conversation here. And Karen, I'll start with you. The second part of that title, they were both gravely ill with COVID, but only one survived. And I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Tell us about Stephen, your husband.
So Stephen and I were two of the first people in the state to contract coronavirus. We were both misdiagnosed with sinus infections. And on St. Patrick's Day, which was a very special holiday for us, I drove him to Winchester Hospital. And as you mentioned earlier, it was a horrible staging area. It was like a MASH unit at the time. They were completely overwhelmed. And a PA came and took him out of the car. And as he was walking, and I should say, we were gravely ill, like the sickest I've ever been in my life. We were completely oxygen deprived. I should never have driven him there. But he turned around and he blew me a kiss and just, like this, and touched his heart and said, "I love you." And I was like a schoolgirl. I was like, "I love you too." It was really beautiful. And then I stayed in the car for 3 or 4 hours until they took me in. That's how bad it was at this time. And when I got into the hospital, I knew that I didn't think he was going to make it, and I knew I was right behind him. So he died a week later. I was in a medically induced coma for 31 days, in the hospital for 65 days, almost died 3 times. And when I woke up to find out that my husband had died. His father, my father-in-law, had died 5 days later. A dear friend of mine died that same 5 days later. And that I run the North Shore Music Theater, and the music theater was closed. So that was what I woke up to. But interestingly, I woke up on his birthday, April 20th. So here everyone was, grieving the loss of his birthday, and then Karen wakes up and gave him something to be happy about.
And you said you thought he brought you back.
Well, I did. I thought he was a gift. When I woke up, I never said to the nurses, and you have to remember at the time, I'm in there by myself, like everything is shut down. And when I woke up, I said to the nurses, "Where are my sisters? Why aren't they here?" And my sister here in the front row nursed me back. Sandra MacArthur, I'll tell you a little bit about that later. But he was, I never said, "Where's Stephen?" because I knew he was gone. Because when you have COVID, when you're in the ICU, you can have really bad hallucinations. But COVID hallucinations are another level. It's like a horror film. And I had those for 31 days. And the whole time he was with me in the hallucinations. And I didn't know he had died because he died after I went into a coma. But he would just smile. He would nod at me like this with a smile, like, "You're going to be okay, babe. You're going to be okay." So my poor sister had the unfortunate task of telling me, and I said to her, she said, "KK, I'm sorry I have to say that Stephen didn't make it." And I said, "I know that," in this little voice, because I was so weak. And she said, "How do you know?" And I said, "He was with me the whole time." So it was, and 2 other really interesting things about that process. One was that when I was in Winchester Hospital, I had to go to the next level of the ICU, and there were no beds available. And Stephen was med-flighted to Leahy, and I got his bed. And then a few days later, I was, basically on death's door, and I needed to get to Leahy, and there were no beds, and Stephen died. And a second time, I got his bed. So it was a beautiful love story, even not only in life, but in death, and honestly, in the afterlife now. So pretty
Thank
lucky.
you for sharing that with us. So, Alex, you made a choice to carry these stories and steward these stories every single day. And what's partly remarkable is, look at you. Look how you're feeling about that story now. How do you carry that much tenderness about so much loss and bring it to people every day and keep yourself whole?
This is going to be a tough one for me, so I'll take your hand on this one. I started Faces of COVID on March 28th, 2020, and I've only taken a couple days off, which is when my own father died of prostate cancer. And, Karen's story was one of fairly early stories that I heard, and actually, it's an interesting story because we were both guests on Jim Browdy's show on Greater Boston, and after the show, I reached out to Karen and I said, "Can I put Stephen on Faces of COVID?" Because the story at the start of the pandemic, which I think everyone will remember at this point, was a data story. It was about flatten the curve. It was about cases and hospitalizations and how many ventilators do we have left, and then ultimately how many people are dying every single day. And we watched this dashboard tick up, and we watched the press conferences. And what was missing throughout was the story of Stephen Richard and thousands and thousands of other people in this state and over 1 million people across this country who had rich and textured lives and people who loved them. They were the center of many people's worlds. And the idea that we could tell the story of this pandemic, that we could write the history of this pandemic without knowing their names, without seeing their faces, without hearing who they were and the little things about their lives, that Stephen was a one of the best photographers who could capture. I remember the post like I could see it in my mind. Those are the details that put us in a position to either learn from what we have been through when the next calamity comes, whether it's climate change, whether it's the next pandemic, or to just make the same mistakes all over again. And if we don't see ourselves in the stories of Karen's husband and the 1 million+ people across this country, we will make those mistakes all over again. And so it is something to carry, but at the same time, it's been a humbling experience because people like Karen have trusted me with those stories and given me the opportunity to share them at a time when we've been isolated from each other. And I wouldn't give that experience up for the world. And I'll just say one last thing, which is that today we're almost 3 years into this pandemic. It'll be in a couple months. Faces of COVID is still sharing stories of people who died in the last 10 days. So the notion that we are somehow past this as people's worlds fall apart when they lose people to this pandemic, that's not tethered to reality.
Karen. What strikes me when you talk about Stephen is this is a story of loss, but it's a love story. And so I want to know how you loved him. Tell me how you loved him.
My favorite part of the story is that, and I've said this so many times, that I knew in the moment how lucky I was, not just looking back. Like, I knew in the moment that I had this great guy. And I can't tell you, almost daily somebody still says to me, I like my husband, but not as much as you and Stephen loved each other, he's okay. I mean, this is a man who every morning brought me a cat. I work 1 million hours. And I work for 3 theaters, and he would bring me a cappuccino every morning with I'm getting out of the shower, would be waiting for me with a free-formed heart out of a different color sugar every day. And there would be days I'd be like, I need it to go! And he would be like so upset that he had to dump it into a to-go cup. Am I gonna screw up the heart? And I would go, baby, just stir the love in. Just stir the love in. It's okay. Don't be hard on yourself. But we had unbelievable respect for each other, and I think that's the key in a relationship. We put each other above self without losing ourselves. And it was never in a bad way. Like, I don't know what it's like to get into a cold car, because he would go out, make sure it was cleaned off, and, I would always say, I wish I had a car starter. And he'd go, you do. So he was really funny. And you know what? We never had kids. We got married late. I was 38, he was 39. We went through 7 rounds of in vitro with incredible humor the whole time. And people say things to you like, that was the end of my marriage. And I'm like, thanks, And but we did it with humor and grace. And, so we never had kids. So our life was kind of a big party because of what I've done for a living. And but he was just a kind, gentle, beautiful soul.
Man, he really loved you.
Oh, he did. And I loved him. We were both lucky to find each other. We really were.
And I do want to point out that the Lazy Susans have made a note of Baby Just Stir the Love In. And I'm fully expecting that we'll hear a song on that.
I hope so, from my lips to their instruments.
You're welcome. All right, so Alex, last question to you. I think about, in a mystical sense, right, all those spirits, all those souls, the memories and the love and the presence and the life and the history of all those people you've carried, and how now they're all a part of you. And I try to imagine containing all of that, and it seems like a lot. But B, who are you now that you've done that?
I think, so there have been 8,127 stories on Faces of COVID. I tried to count it for tonight. And it's amazing that I can recall so many things about all of these people. And at one point during the pandemic, there was a COVID support group for people who had lost somebody on Facebook. And they invited me in to put a post in that said, you can share your story on Faces of COVID. And a woman sent me a message, and she said, I had never heard of Faces of COVID, but I Googled my dad's name at 2 o'clock in the morning at the most depressed I've ever been in my entire life. And the only thing that popped up was a Faces of COVID post, because you had found his obituary and you had shared it, and it was full of replies from people that I have never met and will never meet who wanted to tell me how sorry they were for my loss. And that saved me in that moment. And so what I will say about Faces of COVID is that part of what makes Faces of COVID extraordinary is the fact that there are so few other outlets that have existed in the last 2.5 years to process the loss of this pandemic. It is a Twitter feed, okay? I get up in the morning and I put names out, and yeah, that's hard work. But what's extraordinary is that there's nowhere else to really go except for places like Cognoscenti, because the piece that you all did, where's Chloe and Franny? I feel a lot of ownership over the families that I've interacted with, and that I feel responsible for how they're treated by media. And Chloe and Franny came to me and they said they wanted to profile somebody for Cognoscenti, and I suggested they talk to Karen. And when I listened to their piece, it was the most deeply powerful moment I had almost during the entire time I've done Faces of COVID, because they brought it to life. They brought Stephen into the room. You and I were just talking about how many times we've both listened to it before. And I think the power of that storytelling is so impactful because, and here's sort of the point I was trying to get to, at the end of the day, what Faces of COVID can do is show people that in the depths of a pandemic like this, we actually do still have a reason to care about each other, and that I don't need to know you. I don't need to be your friend. I don't need to have been to your house for dinner to have a stake in whether you and your family survive one of the worst calamities that have hit this country in decades, right? That we have a responsibility to look out for each other even if we don't know each other. And I think that's the most common thing I heard from people who've interacted and seen their stories, their family stories on Faces of COVID, is the fact that it was strangers. Because we are pumped with information these days to tell us that we all hate each other, right? And that we shouldn't trust each other and we should be fearful of one another and all of these things. And it was a most basic reminder to me that we have a genuine stake in looking after each other. And I'm also grateful that it brought my new dear friend Karen into my life, because we get to hang out now, and that's been very special. So.
You gonna sing us out?
Okay.
You want to tell us the song?
So in the middle, honestly, these two women should have gotten a Pulitzer for this interview. I have said this 100 times. It's not because of what I said. It's the editing that they did that was so brilliant. Poppycock sales went through the roof because of that part of the conversation, because it was...
Give context there. It's a food, and they ate it on Christmas morning.
As I said, it's like Cracker Jacks on steroids. And it was a Christmas tradition that my husband and I had. And so then for some reason they said, oh, this is 10 o'clock in the morning in my dining room. We're doing this interview and on Zoom. And they said, oh, you're a singer? And I said, yeah. And they said, oh, was there a particular song that you sang to Stephen? And I said, yeah, Fly Me to the Moon. And they're like, would you sing it for us? And without missing a beat, because, showtime, line up, girls. I was like, so I did it like this. And I was like, fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand. In other words, darling, kiss me. Fill my heart with song and let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, please be true. In other words, I love you. Oh, yeah.
Coming down to the last bit of the race, they say the point two is always the hardest.
And she's been so inspirational for so many other wheelchair athletes. stopped. And when I was getting ready to turn onto Boylston Street, I couldn't feel my hands at that point. I could barely move my arms. I was very stiff. My clothes were dripping wet. It felt like that finish line was very, very far away, even though I was so close to it.
And to see her win on a day like this
And I just kept telling myself, it's right there, you did it, it's right there. Just keep going, just keep moving. But I did it.
Tiziana McFadden winning her 5th Boston Marathon, crossing the finish line and breaking the tape.
Climate change drives a hard bargain. Some communities will be saved, and some will be left to succumb to the sea or the desert or wildfires. Breezy Point may find a way to mitigate the coming crisis, but most likely it's on borrowed time. The smart thing to do is sell the house. And yet, when I sit on the porch, I can hear the bell of the channel buoy swaying in the bay. The logic of science, the checkbook calculations, they have no power here. As Pascal said, the heart has its reasons, which reason does not know.
After over 40 years of marriage, I think I finally grasped the song's truth. Deep, enduring love makes you insatiable, but sturdy. I've learned that from my husband more than from a case of you. But Mitchell's songs remain my lifelong companions, my provocations, my speed bumps, my streetlights. Without knowing it, Joni, part of you pours out of me in these lines from time to time.
You ready?
Always.
You feeling good?
Excellent.
All right. So everyone, I wanted to introduce you to Jeff Davis, who wrote a piece called Let Black Men Run. Chicago-born, Boston-based, parent. You advocate, as your bio says, for truth, justice, running, and more Black heroes. Do you think you've become one?
If I may, I wanna be political and tangent for a minute. First, I want to just acknowledge I'm not sitting in the stage. Black Men Run doesn't exist, if not for my beautiful wife, Andrea. I love you. Thank you for sharing this journey with me and sticking with me, especially when I don't get it right. I love you. Second, I want to acknowledge my brothers, Sugino and Jeff Joseph, without whom the day-to-day and the reality of Black Men Run doesn't exist. They've been there since the very beginning, and it's my humble opportunity to be able to represent as much of their stories as mine. Last, John, Karen, Alex, Ted, it's an honor to share this stage with you and share your stories with us. And thank you, Chloe and Franny, for making this a reality. This is it's amazing. Thank you. To answer your question, no, I don't feel like a hero. I believe in heroes. I'm a huge blurred. But I feel like if I can stand up for the right things, stand up for truth and justice, then anyone should be able to. I would define heroism as the ability to face the fear inside of you and do the right thing in spite of. So,
Let's hear a little bit of your piece.
Okay.
We've got a little here.
The anguish of Ahmaud Arbery's death scarred me. I knew he could have been me, or one of my sons. Learning that his death was essentially covered up by law enforcement forced me to question everything. I realized marching and voting would never be enough. for America to see black people as worthy of our whole humanity. And I realized I couldn't help my boys change the world until I helped myself first. In the end, losing Ahmaud forced me to find healthier ways to cope.
It's 34 degrees this morning. There's about 10 brothers with us. It's all for love. Today's about community.
Last year, I started a local chapter of Black Men Run. A group of us run together every Saturday morning.
Black Men Run at the starting line. 2, 1, let's get it. Let's get it.
Committed to health and rooted in love, we are a living testament to Ahmaud's memory.
When you say committed to health and rooted in love, those are not passing words for you. Those are deep, important ideas for you.
It is something that my family is like comically large. You can ask my wife later. Like my parents are each one of 11 siblings. Like I mean large, and we make babies. And so like I think, you know, picking up on a thread that Alex shared is like I feel like so much of like African American experience is extrapolated as like stats and facts and whatever. I have experienced every walk of Black life through my family and their loved ones, and there are some facts and things that stick out and that like are seared in should be seared into our psyche. Because the truth and the history, the hard truth of our society exists in them. The one that sticks out for me for Black Men Run around health is the fact that if you live in Back Bay, and we all know who lives in Back Bay, your life expectancy is 91 years old. It's pretty good. If you go 3 miles that way to Roxbury, your life expectancy is 58 years old. That's not an accident. And the work that it took to get to that stat today in 2022, it's not an accident. It's not something that is lightly, you can't overlook that. And I've grown up with people saying, well, what's wrong with you? Just be better. You're good, but how come all your other, folks don't dress up like you? Right? Oh, you're so clean. You're so articulate. Right? And so when for health, it has to be deeper than that. And I'll go one step further. When I started this chapter, it wasn't the Black part or the wrong part that gave me pause. It was the men part. Mm. As men, we're not supposed to have emotions. We're not supposed to actually acknowledge our own humanity and our innate humanity in all of its multiplicity, right? And so it was in my soul, it felt like if I could do a part to like really talk about health, the holistic health of a man, of a Black man in this country, like it's my responsibility to take on that responsibility, or that mantle, if you will. And then from a love part, we don't talk about love. I'm sorry.
Do you mind if I pause you for a second?
No, I'll go ahead.
Because I would love to put the video up behind you while you talk about love.
Okay.
Because I feel like I can see the love in this.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
I don't.
And we'll bring the sound down in a minute after we hear a bit of it. Thank you for letting me put this up in the background.
You're welcome.
Now,
Thank you.
Talk about the love.
We don't talk about love. And I think in our society, we talk about love in such a superficial way. Like, we actively use the word love. When I say I love these men over here, I love them like my family, because I know that the best part of me is going to come out with them. If I am having an off day, if I'm having a moment, they're going to hear me, listen to me, hold me. We have literally, Tiziana, we've literally had grown men come to us, finish a run, and just break down. Mm. And what was overwhelming one of the overwhelming feelings I had starting back in my room was the fact that like I'm holding and carrying all this grief. George was just murdered. We just found out Breonna was murdered months ago. We just found out Ahmaud was murdered months ago. Tony McDade was killed in that week. And oh, and by the way, I work in HR and I had to fire 20 people that week. I was grieving, deep in my grief. And I had, when I discovered Black Men Run, by virtue of my wife, I was compelled to see if I could find one other brother in this city. Is there one other Black man in this city who might also be grieving? And for those of us who are athletes or runners, you know that you don't get the privilege of choosing which emotions show up. When you actually physically try, all those dormant emotions come flooding forward. And so if you're a Black man and you spent 50 years of your life hiding, suppressing, digging a deep hole, and all of a sudden you finish a 3-mile run and you can't help but compel yourself, it'd be pretty beautiful to have a bunch of Black men just literally hold you up and just say, we love you, bro, it's okay.
My last question for you. You centered, when you wrote about this, you centered fatherhood too. So you've been running a while. You've built this community of love and health. What does it mean for your boys?
This week I ordered them their first Black Man Run shirts, so I'll start with that.
That's perfect.
My 7 and 5-year-old sons, Theo and Felix, they have been saying, we'll come run with you when we're ready, which is actually what grown men say to me as well. So, and then one day my wife offered me the gift of leaving town. And it was like, look, fellas, we all we got, so you got to come run. And so I offered so we started running, we got about a mile in, and my 7-year-old, I said, hey, we can turn back because your little brother's getting tired and we were just going to start the run, it's fine. And he looks at me and he goes, I'll see you later. What? Like, yeah, it's fine. I'm gonna finish. And so he proceeds to finish his 5K route. And what hit me afterwards was like, I didn't think for a second about his safety and security. I didn't think for a second, like, I don't have family here. I'm from Chicago, right? This is my chosen family here. And to know that he's surrounded by his uncles, his cousins who love him, are going to take care of him. They don't know that yet, right? But they were always taking care of them. And it was a gift. I often think about how my kids won't grow up the way I do. They won't be surrounded by Blackness the way I'm in an interracial marriage. It's going to be different, right? But to know that the image, I still haven't experienced this, but seeing the image of a group of Black men just running, not running from anybody, we're not chasing anybody, we're just running because our lives are more important. And that is the kind of world that I want my children to grow up in. That is the kind of imagery I want them to see. I want you to see these Black proud men in all the rainbow of humanity that they represent. And we're just united in our ability to be alive because our ancestors fought for that. And it's okay to be proud. And yes, I have a white chocolate baby and a milk chocolate baby. And all of us are in this together. And so you're Black, he's Black, y'all are interracial kids, and these are all your uncles, get to know them, and we'll keep running. And so I'll end with my oldest, and he's saying how after that run, he was like, I won that race. So.
My name is Steve Almond. I'm a writer and teacher in the Boston area. And I think what Cognoscenti, what makes it special to me as somebody who has written for it for years is I really feel like when I encounter the news cycle and all the bad events that are kind of tearing at us all the time, I feel very sort of shaken up and reactive towards them. And what I look to Cognoscenti for as a writer and as a reader is the chance to kind of step back from history and try to figure out the meaning of what we're living through. That's what I try to do in my writing, and the pieces that really have resonated with me over the years from Cognoscenti, I always have that feeling of a writer who's trying to step back and understand the meaning of the events that are swirling around us. It's kind of a refuge for me.
My name is Nima Avashia, and I'm an educator in the Boston Public Schools. And what I love most about Cognoscenti and think makes it different from other media outlets is that in many media outlets, the opinions of experts with a capital E are centered, and the opinions of ordinary people are kind of shoved to the side. But at Cognoscenti, the invitation is for regular people to weigh in on the experiences that they're having and what's happening into the world at large. And so really, regular people are the experts at Cognoscenti.
Hi, my name is Laura Everett, and I'm a minister, a mender, and a writer. Cognoscenti means to me a very public conversation with a very opinionated congregation. In my tradition as a pastor, there's this phrase about a call and response between the preacher and the congregation. And when I write for Cognoscenti, boy, you all respond. You talk back to me. You tell me what you think. You tell me when I'm wrong. I wrote a piece about praying for Donald Trump when he had COVID. And boy, did people have a lot of opinions about that. But it's that dialogue, that back and forth that I crave, that I've missed during hard days. And it's what I value so much about Cognoscenti.
So my name is Ted Flanagan. I'm a writer and a paramedic from Worcester. That's right, Worcester. Central Mass. I wrote this piece for Cognoscenti 2015 or 16. And one of the great things I love about contributing to the site is that it helps me or allows me an opportunity to unravel some complicated thoughts I might have about something. William Kennedy, the great novelist, used to talk about thinking with his fingertips. And, Chloe and Franny have always just offered this incredible space to think about these things. And so I have this dual career going, and I tried to add baseball coach to it. And it didn't go so well. And yet I was trying to understand how I could be so bad at something and yet have it be perhaps the single best event of my life. And so this is sort of what came out of that. Even in July, the nights in Milford, New York, a small town at the base of the Adirondacks, are humid and cool. I know this because a few summers ago, I sat on a picnic table outside a cabin, wondering if I'd officially ruined baseball for the dozen boys sleeping peacefully inside. Milford is just a few miles from baseball's spiritual home, Cooperstown, New York. We'd gone there to play in a tournament with 103 other teams from around the country, and I was in the midst of leading our team to 104th place. It hadn't occurred to me in the workup to the tournament that we could come in dead last. It turns out, though, that there is a subculture of ultra-competitive 12 and 13-year-old baseball. The boys on these other squads had the bodies of college players and the skills to match. They play on larger fields than standard Little League dimensions and travel the country and the world because that's the only way they can find teams good enough to play them. We watched one team from Pennsylvania, the eventual tournament champions, play an early game. Those kids hit line drives off the wooden walls of the outfield so hard they sounded like rifle shots. We lost game after game, but our boys celebrated hits and the occasional run with exuberance. And we looked ahead, always ahead, to the next game where the score would be 0-0, at least for a bit. For the week, we asked the boys on our team to ignore the scoreboard, to play for each other and their families in the stands, to give everything they had simply because it was the right thing to do. We told them that there would be plenty of winning in each of their lives. That character is revealed when times are tough, and that we were proud of them. As coaches, what we were really saying was, we're sorry we let you down. But the boys responded. They never hung their heads or threw their gloves, and other teams noticed. After we lost our sole playoff game, several teams formed a gauntlet to applaud the boys as they left the field. After their own elimination, a team from Illinois came to our cabin dressed in their uniforms and baseball spikes to invite our boys to have pizza with them. One night near the end of the week, long after we were out of contention, I watched a 12-year-old with Bryce Harper's hulking build and Ricky Henderson's speed tear off for home on a pass ball. In one motion, he slid across home plate, popped to his feet, spun in midair, then trotted back to the dugout. It was a perfect expression of power, speed, and grace executed by a young man clearly born to play the game with a skill most of us will never possess. And beyond the right field wall, on a small bluff, I could see a grassy area bathed in the sun's waning orange light. And there they were, my boys. They played wiffle ball. They wheeled in and spinning around each other like seagulls. In and out of shadows and bright light, their laughter clear from 100 yards away. Maybe they came in last, but they belonged here too. The boys reminded me that there is still joy to be had in picking up the lance and jousting at windmills.
Hi, my name is Tafazo Mgue. I go by Taf. I'm a physician in the Boston area, and I've had the privilege of working with COG on a few articles. I had never thought of myself as a public writer before, but through COG, I was able to share a few perspectives on hot topics in America a couple times. But what I really have liked about them is they have created this platform where diverse voices can be heard, can share perspectives. The second thing is they have very supportive staff that has really made for a very personalized experience for me in my drafting and actually writing, increasing clarity. And lastly, I've really appreciated the platform, which has allowed me to reach an audience within my city and way beyond.
Hi, I'm Sharon Brody. I'm the Weekend Edition host here at WBUR, and I also host other news programs during the week. And of course, as a contributor to Cognoscenti, I'm deeply invested in COG, and I love reading it for the range of material, and I love writing it for the range of material that we all get to experience. And one of my angles is that I process the world and my understanding of it through humor. And I like to be able to offer that to readers. And if I come up with an idea in an essay that maybe makes somebody laugh or just gets them from point A to B and they feel like it's been a little bit of a hoot, then I can think of no higher calling.
We're back.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Taf, Sharon, Steve, Laura. All of you, everybody. Can't begin to thank all of you. This has just been such an incredible, validating experience.
Yeah, and we're back just for a bit, just basically to say goodnight, and I wanted to offer a few closing words before we go. And I'd like to take us back actually to that image of us recording in our closets, which was kind of a funny image to share in front of a large group, but I'm just going to go with it. It was actually a really clarifying exercise for us, as it turned out, because it forced us at a really difficult moment in our lives and in the world to distill what we were trying to do down to its very essence, like orange juice.
It helped us realize that all these essays that we publish about illness and death and love and connection, despair and hope, they're actually stories about grappling with change and uncertainty on scales big and small, global and personal.
And navigating change, whatever the flavor, is the most human of pursuits, I think. So thank you all for reading. Thank you for writing these last 10 years. And thank you for being here. We're excited for what's to come. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.